Our heroes head into the snowy wastes, searching for their typical opponents, goblins. But there's gonna be a big twist to this adventure. Hello everybody, and welcome to this light novel review. I'm Justus Stone, and on my channel I cover all things light novels. I do reviews, countdowns of the most popular titles in Japan, news, and the light novel podcast is posted here as well. So if you love light novels, or maybe you're just starting to get into them, you should consider subscribing. In this video I'm going to be discussing volume number 5 of Kumo Kagyu's light novel series, Goblin Slayer. This one is released by Yen On. If you want to pick up your own copy, I've got links to Amazon and the book depository in the description down below. After the last volume's short story volume, which had short stories that occurred throughout the timeline of Goblin Slayer, in this volume we start back into the linear timeline, so this one is set after volume number 3. This one sees winter starting to descend, and our characters heading out into the mountains, where it's even colder and snowier, at the behest of Sword Maiden. Turns out that a group of adventurers have gone out to take on some goblins in this area and disappeared. Like that ever happens. In any case, one of them is the daughter of a noble family, and they've requested that Sword Maiden find someone to go out and find out what happened to their daughter. And so, of course, Sword Maiden being Sword Maiden, she calls on her resident expert in goblins, Goblin Slayer, and sends him to figure out what's happened. What our party actually ends up discovering is that the goblins are not behaving the way goblins normally do. Seems even like they've got sort of a larger plan going on, which is very un-goblin-like. So, of course, our characters are going to face a brand new challenge that it's going to be up to Goblin Slayer to pull out all the stops and, well, kind of get outside of the box to try and figure out how to win the day. Now this one's very much like volume number 2. It's a single quest throughout the entire story. Again, it's a quest that's given to them by Sword Maiden. And this one, of course, the same as in volume 2, we have goblins behaving in somewhat un-goblin-like behavior. Now, it's been a while since I read volume number 2, but this one does feel quite different. I mean, there's a couple of different aspects to it. First of all, there's the fact that there's this village that is sort of in the immediate line of fire of these goblins, and so that kind of introduces a different dynamic to things. We also have a new character who, at least for part of the book, joins our band of adventurers in taking on the goblins. She's actually an adventurer who survived the goblin attack. Now, I will say that this volume does bring back the thing about goblins and rape. This character, we do not see her assault. It's not detailed in the book. The light novels are not as graphic as, say, the manga or even the anime, although I wouldn't say the anime was as graphic as even the manga, but nonetheless, the light novels do cut away, but there's really no doubt left in your mind what happened, especially when she does say that her chastity was one of the things that the goblins stole. So there is definitely that theme again in this volume. The one thing that I appreciated at least was with this character, she wasn't just a one-note character. She was allowed to go through a multitude of stages of grief and reaction to what had happened to her, and they all felt very appropriate given the situations that she and the party found themselves in. I also liken the fact that with this other character, we have Goblin Slayer dealing with somebody who is not part of his immediate circle of friends. And we find ourselves questioning again just who Goblin Slayer is and what his motivations are. At one point you kind of think maybe he's just having this girl tag along because he figures it's a way for her to deal with her grief. At other points you start thinking, I think maybe he's just using her for her abilities. And really at the end of the day, you I kind of felt myself wondering if maybe it was all of the above, actually. And as much as, I have said I've enjoyed Goblin Slayer's progression as a character, going from that very cold and solo adventurer that we met in volume number 1 to this person who is starting to learn about, well, basically how to interact with other human beings, I still like to see that ultimately there's still that kind of, it's all about the mission aspect of the character. If you're an existing fan of Goblin Slayer, you're probably going to love this volume. It has all the stuff that fans of the series are really into. It has that very Dungeons and Dragon feeling kind of campaign type thing. It has the characters with their banter with one another and that sort of levity that comes with the interactions that these characters have and the way they converse with one another. I'm not a huge fan of the whole like focus on boobs thing that happens. Like there's one point where the author goes out of his way to mention how like Cowgirl's leaning over the counter and her boobs are like resting on the countertop. Like I don't know, like to me this series works really well as like a dungeon diving adventure. And when you have those kind of really light novel-y, I mean, I don't know how else to describe it, but when you really have those kind of things like the obsession with breasts and girls always reacting to other girls and their breast size and everything else, it just doesn't really fit in this series, and that's probably my one complaint about it. Thankfully, it doesn't happen as often as I've seen it in other light novels, but nonetheless, when it does happen, it always takes me out of the story a bit. One of the aspects that I liked about this novel was that it brings the whole idea of the gods and how the gods can just sort of arbitrarily change the direction of the world more into play. I don't want to get into spoilers about it, but this series has always talked about he lets no one roll the dice, which is a direct reference to the fact that the gods roll dice and sort of play games, basically. They treat the world as their plaything. And actually in our light novel podcast when we talked about Goblin Slayer, we said it's almost like the gods are akin to players. If you take that whole D&D metaphor as far as you want to take it, it's almost like the gods are the players and then the characters are characters, right? And it's kind of I think it's kind of a neat metaphor, and it does actually really work when you take a look at things. But this is one of those series that as much as we've seen the gods kind of get involved in the odd thing along the way, I kind of felt in this one that it was kind of neat because it wasn't like the god was directly meddling. Like, if I recall, like the most that we've seen the gods really be active was, I think, actually in volume 2, funny enough, which I said was similar to this one, where like we see the god kind of actively creating this trap, this dungeon, this thing going on. In this one, it's more like it just shows how the gods are ambivalent and how, you know, if you just strike a god's fancy the right way, it can change the direction that you go in a massive way that could have incredible implications for the world if it's allowed to run its course. And of course, Goblin Slayer getting involved in the whole mess just kind of helps to re-emphasize that whole, he doesn't let people just roll the dice. So it's that whole idea that, yeah, this sort of arbitrary luck or this arbitrary decision that Goblin Slayer himself is still meddling with it to make sure that it's not allowed to run its course. So all in all, if you've loved Goblin Slayer up until now, I think this is going to be a really satisfying volume for you. If you hate Goblin Slayer or have not found a reason to enjoy Goblin Slayer, I don't think there's really anything in this volume that's going to change your mind. It has a lot of the stuff that, as I said, people have found problematic, and it really is a feeling of a D&D campaign, which I know some people haven't really appreciated either. People kind of feel like that lacks a little bit in the originality, but for me, I enjoy it, and I enjoy these characters. I enjoy the dynamic between the group of Goblin Slayer Priestess, Dwarf Shaman, Lizard Priest, High Elf Archer. I really like how that group fits and works together and how their personalities kind of complement and play off of each other. It's some really good stuff to me. I find it really entertaining. So all in all, I was really pleased with this volume. It gave me all the things that I want from a Goblin Slayer book, and I'm looking forward to checking out the next one. For my next review, I'm going to be checking out the brand new Nishio Ishin title from Vertical, Katanagatari, the story about a samurai searching out 12 cursed blades or twisted blades, or, well, we'll talk about it in the next review. In the meantime, thanks for joining me in this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.